Hello everyone, it's Vanessa and welcome back to my channel. And today we're doing something a little different, just basically having a conversation about the gradual changes and decline in popularity of the traditional resort experience that I've noticed over the past 7 years of doing this, and what that means for your future travel plans. And more than ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts and personal observations and experiences, as there's a lot to unpack in what I'm about to say, some popular and some not so popular, I'm sure, so let's just get right into it. The first issue I'd like to discuss is the lack of expansion I've noticed in the past year or two, and this is true of both resort brands as a whole and individual properties as well. Those of you who've been around for a while will remember back when I first started the channel in 2018 and 19, I always did a video on the best new resorts opening for the coming year. But with every passing year since then, it's gotten increasingly difficult to make that list as the rate of resort expansion has slowed down quite a bit. Now, that's the rate of expansion. Brands are still, of course, building new properties and expanding existing ones, but certainly not at the same clip that they used to. It was hard keeping up with all the new properties popping up back when I first started the channel. Of course, there are many good reasons for this slowdown, not the least of which would be, especially pre-2020, times were much different, not denying that at all, and we'll address that in a bit more detail later, as well as the current global economic downturn. These are big events, and trust me, I sympathize as this very directly affects me. But I just throw my hands up because there's literally nothing you can do about these very serious global events. So I'm not saying there aren't valid reasons for slowdown in resort development, believe me, but it's hard to keep the average customer/traveler engaged or loyal to a specific resort brand, or even choosing a resort vacation consistently when there's not much new and exciting happening, especially when that's the average consumer expectation these days, to constantly be adding new and exciting, as well as updating and modernizing. And that's unfortunately not in the budget for a lot of travel companies these days. Now let's very briefly discuss marketing changes. Back in the day, most resort brands exclusively used very traditional marketing like TV commercials, magazine ads, and travel agents that had exclusive bookings. And then right around the time I started the channel, 6 to 8 years ago, it became all about the influencer. And not just travel influencers. You had beauty and lifestyle influencers that received free trips and even additional compensation. Wasn't ever me, but there were many others who would quote-unquote advertise these properties and brands on behalf of the company on platforms like YouTube and especially Instagram. And then it changed again, and over the last couple of years, you're seeing a lot, and I mean a lot of these brands, almost all of them honestly, that now have their own Instagram and TikTok accounts, and they're doing all their own marketing exclusively, which I'm sure saves money in these difficult times. But does it equally convince the customer? And I'd have to say no. Of course, many influencers who are receiving compensation were going to be biased, but they did usually add some additional negatives to consider, versus now, where you're just getting the 100% rose-colored slant of the brand or property itself. And of course, everything is going to appear perfect on their social media accounts. And frankly, I don't think it's doing these brands any favors. And I don't know what others think, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now to what I personally think is the most important issue. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's pricing. And I have to say that I'm shocked that so many people are shocked. Again, those of you who stuck around for a while remember that I mentioned in at least a few videos back in 2020, and then I just gave up, that if you could put fears aside, those prices were as good as they were going to get in our lifetime. And I remember we personally kept traveling quite a bit at the time in 2020 and 21, the most traveling we've done, honestly, because we got dirt cheap first-class flights, resort rates, but the airports were empty for well over a year, going on 2. And I said at the time, when these islands and properties finally fully open, these rates are going to be at least triple what they are now. And here we are. I've seen some properties go from a starting nightly rate of $400 a night to $1,300 a night on average. And I really don't think that they're ever going to come down to what they were. There's been this stalemate happening for the past few years now, where the brands feel that they need to make up all the revenue losses for being closed for years, and the customer keeps waiting for the rates to come down, and no one is budging. Like the housing market, right? But what's even more frustrating for the customer is the obvious decrease in value. Engaging from what I've seen in channel comments, message boards, other social media platforms, this has frustrated travelers even more, with most saying they'd be willing to pay the increase in resort rates if they felt they were receiving the same or better value to what the standard used to be. So more specifically, the past few years, and maybe you've noticed as well, both the quality and portion sizes for all-inclusive buffets and a la carte dining has not been up to the standard of what it used to be pre-2020. I see that complaint a lot, but what I see even more complaints over is staffing shortages and overall decline in service for a lot of these resorts. And guests basically saying, how are you going to charge me so much more per night for such a watered-down experience compared to how it used to be when it was a lot cheaper? So please sound off if you're one of the many in this camp. But hands down, bar none, the biggest thing that has led to the decline in resort popularity is the rise in cruising. Now, cruise rates have steadily gone up the past few years. We started cruising occasionally 2.5 years ago and have another one planned next month. Check out our Instagram where we'll be sharing our travels there. So I know firsthand that cruising rates have definitely gone up. Maybe not as suddenly and shockingly all at once like resorts, but they've more gradually continued to raise rates over time to the point that the price gap between all-inclusive resorts and cruises has narrowed a lot to where they're almost equal. So the rates are no longer the draw. But I think it's just the cruising experience that everyone is in love with now. We've observed that most cruisers don't even get off the ship at pretty much every stop in the Caribbean. They're just there for the ship, which is funny because 5-6 years ago, there was a definite stigma around cruising just being for a certain demographic, and that's all out the window as everyone and their cousin is cruising. Just take a look on YouTube. It's the one sector of travel that continues to explode, and some of these channels were around for 10, 12 years and had 30, 40,000 subscribers, and they've jumped tenfold since the cruising craze started in 2022. And I really thought this would be a phase that would fade away after a few years, but it's only growing, with some lines adding even more private island destinations and ships being added like every 6 months. It's crazy for some of these cruise brands. And I do see the draw. It's not for everyone, but with a lot of these lines that have private island destinations, you get a short 8-hour all-inclusive resort preview and then jump back on the ship to continue the ship experience, and you get a taste of both types of vacations. And I also see a lot of travelers who just love the feeling that they're on a floating city. Again, not for everyone. Some people just want to relax on one beach location for an extended period of time. But I do see the draw for sure and truly believe that for now, cruising will continue to be the popular vacation choice for many. So there you have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the future of all-inclusive resorts, and please share your own personal experiences as well. Have you switched from resorts to cruising, or do you think it's all just too expensive? For more reviews, tips, and a peek into our travels, be sure to check out my Passport Pages travel Instagram, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye, everyone.